The book of Genesis records that God warns Noah to build an ark.
The flood narrative in the Bible deals with evil and sin and iniquity.
Rain falls on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. All the springs of the great deep burst forth.
The flood is a kind of reversal of creation.
Every living creature on the face of the earth is destroyed, almost.
Because of the flood, all of mankind is wiped out. You don't get more apocalyptic than that.
Now, two ocean scientists set out to solve the mystery of Noah's flood. Bill Ryan and Walter Pitman spent 40 years on their quest. They uncover the secrets of the deep and discover that the truth is down there.
Oh, you live for this. You know, it rarely happens in a scientific lifetime, but it did happen to us.
And this could be the type of flood of Genesis. This could be Noah's flood.
Summer 1970. The 400-foot research vessel Glomar Challenger is deployed in the Mediterranean Sea. Its mission: to study the seafloor, a kilometer or more below the surface. Among the scientists on board is 30-year-old oceanographer Bill Ryan.
The job of an oceanographer, of a seagoing oceanographer, is full of adventure and excitement. You can't believe that you're getting paid to do it.
The middle of the Mediterranean is a challenging place to gather evidence. Roughnecks must lower drill pipe through hundreds of meters of water and then bore deep into the ocean floor. The tubular core samples they pull up are what the scientists are here to study.
You pull out a cylinder of mud, essentially, 9 meters long. And that's examined right there on the ship in the lab.
What Ryan discovers here will lead him on the quest of a lifetime to solve the mystery of Noah's flood. When Ryan studies the core samples, he finds something extraordinary. Deep in the sediment core is a thick layer of salt. It could mean just one thing. Millions of years ago, the Mediterranean Sea lost almost all its water.
We were seeing a sea that had dried out, or almost entirely dried out.
It's an astonishing result. 5 million years ago, the Mediterranean Sea was a dry desert basin. It was separated from the world ocean by a land barrier at Gibraltar.
This discovery is what we call serendipity. You could never have imagined it.
Now Ryan is faced with another question. How did the Mediterranean fill up again? Again, the sediment cores provide the answer. They show that when the water returned, it happened amazingly fast.
The barrier between the Mediterranean and the open ocean burst, and it rapidly flooded.
Ryan discovers that the whole Mediterranean goes from a dry desert basin to a sea kilometers deep in a geological instant. Outside New York, at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, he discusses the find with colleagues John Dewey and Walter Pitman.
Ryan and Dewey and I were sitting together because we were working on a scientific problem together. And when Ryan announced this discovery, Dewey, when he heard that, just laughingly, jokingly said, well, maybe that's the explanation for Noah's flood.
Of course not. This is 5 million years ago. Our hominoid species has not even appeared yet.
And we all laughed because the Mediterranean event was much too old.
But Dewey won't let it go. Now he poses a question which will inspire Ryan and Pitman to undertake a 40-year quest.
Do you think Noah's flood could be explained by a similar event of a very isolated sea getting connected with the global ocean?
It's a provocative hypothesis. Ryan and Pitman can't resist it.
Afterward, Ryan and I got talking about this possibility, and we said, let's go take a look. Let's see what the geologic data tells us.
These two ocean scientists now set out to unravel the mysteries of the best-known story in the Old Testament, Noah's flood.
It begins with Noah, who is approached by God and told that because of the iniquity of humanity, because of the evil things they are doing, God intends to destroy the world and to restart with Noah.
Noah builds an ark and famously takes into it 2 of every living creature on earth. Then the flood begins.
Destruction through the flood is by water, but it doesn't just come from above, it comes from below as well. It says the abyss, the great caverns in the sea opened up and water rose up both from the bottom and from the top.
It's as if the pieces of creation that were put in place to hold the waters back are crumbling and the water is gushing out from below.
When the storm abates, the ark comes to rest on a mountaintop. Noah sends out a raven and then a dove to check if land has emerged.
After the flood is finished and Noah comes out the ark with his people, God promises a covenant with Noah and with all life that the world will never be destroyed again through water. And as a signifier of that, we have the rainbow in the sky.
It's one of the best-known stories in the Bible. But where and when did it happen? And what became of the ark? On this, the Bible is frustratingly vague.
The Bible gives us no real indication of where the flood took place or where Noah was living beforehand. I mean, we know when the flood happens, it covers the earth, but where was Noah before he built the ark? We don't know.
Genesis records that the ark ends up in the mountains of Ararat. Today, Mount Ararat and the surrounding peaks are in Turkey, to the southeast of the Black Sea. Some believe that a boat-like rock formation here is in fact the fossilized remains of the ark. But the experts are unconvinced.
Nobody has found the Ark yet, and I suspect that nobody will ever find it, because the first thing that Noah would have done is to take apart the Ark and build houses and barns out of it. So we shouldn't be looking for Noah's Ark, we should be looking for Noah's house.
With the Ark lost, many come to believe that the Genesis account is no more than a myth. But Ryan and Pitman disagree. They suspect that a catastrophic flood, like the one Ryan discovered in the Mediterranean 5 million years ago, is behind the story. To get to the bottom of it, they must now discover where that hypothetical flood happens. They are looking for a sea that could be cut off from the global ocean by falling water levels, then dry out, and eventually be re-flooded again.
We were looking for a place that was rather arid, where if you blocked off the entrance to the ocean, it would be likely to dry out.
We looked first at the Sea of Japan. Its connections to the Pacific Ocean were too deep. It could never have been disconnected.
We looked at the Red Sea. There were a lot of sediment cores from the Red Sea, and they said no, it hadn't dried out.
We looked at the Persian Gulf.
The Persian Gulf, the geometry of the bottom was just not right.
They widen their investigation. After extensive research, they identify one body of water which does fit the bill: the Black Sea.
The Black Sea has only one connection with the world ocean. It's through the Bosporus. The Bosporus goes from the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara and then the Hellespont.
The conditions are right for a potential flood. If the Black Sea ever did dry out, and global ocean levels rose enough to overwhelm a land barrier at the Bosporus, then it would refill with catastrophic consequences. In 1971, the two scientists decide to focus their search right there. To prove the flood, they need to get physical evidence. But they face an obstacle. The Black Sea is key strategic territory for the Soviet Union. With the Cold War ongoing, it's not easy for Americans to go there. It will be 2 decades before the Iron Curtain falls, and Ryan and Pitman get the chance to continue their search.
The idea we put it on the back burner somewhere and just let it sit there and stew for 20 years.
New York, 1993. The Cold War is over. At the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, Bill Ryan is opening his mail. He notices an unusual envelope.
This letter arrives with stamps I've not seen before, and from Bulgaria. And so the introduction was intriguing.
The letter is from a Bulgarian oceanographer, Dr. Petko Dimitrov. He's heard of Ryan's interest in Noah's flood. He suspects that a catastrophic flood may well have hit the Black Sea. It's a wake-up call for Ryan.
Maybe this wild hypothesis that the Black Sea had, in fact, behaved somewhat like the Mediterranean had 5 million years ago was real.
Ryan is desperate to investigate this for himself. But to do that, he needs a research ship and crew. Just weeks later, fate again intervenes. He receives a letter from a team of Russian oceanographers. They invite him to participate in a research voyage into the Black Sea. It's the opportunity he is looking for.
So with this invitation, it takes me nanoseconds to say, of course.
Ryan runs to Walter Pitman's office to tell him the good news.
So I rushed to Walter. Shall we go? He was a little hesitant.
Pitman has been to Russia before. He still does not trust the new democracy.
I was a bit wary about going to Russia. I know that the government had changed, so there are always possibilities, and I was not too happy about the possibilities there.
With or without Pitman, Ryan is determined to go. With mounting excitement, he begins to prepare for the expedition.
I say, yes, I'm coming, and I'm bringing a new sonar device. They ask if I can get a hold of a GPS. I say yes.
At the last minute, Walter Pitman changes his mind. After 20 years of waiting, the opportunity is too good to miss.
A few days before we're leaving, Walter says, oh, I'll get a ticket, I'll come with you. So off we go on this fantastic adventure.
Ryan and Pitman fly to Moscow. They travel to the Black Sea coast, to the port of Gelendzhik. The ship which will carry them on their quest is the research vessel Aquanaut.
The Aquanaut is a small oceanographic vessel. It's actually a converted fishing vessel.
They were a wonderful bunch of sailors. I think just the adventure of going out with a couple of good-natured Americans made them very happy.
Ryan and Pitman want to find evidence that Noah's flood happened here, in the Black Sea. To do that, they need to prove that the Black Sea flooded rapidly enough to create a legend. And that it happened within the past 10,000 years, when a person like Noah might have lived through it. They have just a fortnight on board the Aquanaut to do it.
So we set sail as scheduled and head over to we call the edge of the continental shelf.
First, the team deploy a sophisticated side-scan sonar device. This will give them an accurate picture of the ocean floor.
So it'd go weep, weep, weep. So you'd get, in that pulse, you'd get quite a variety of frequencies. It would be reflected off of the bottom, and the reflection would be recorded in the instrument and then processed.
On the Aquanaut, Ryan and Pitman eagerly monitor the sonar readings. If a flood here happens slowly, waves would erode any coastal features. But if there was a rapid flood, traces of the submerged ancient coastline will be detectable. Sooner than they could hope for, they hit pay dirt.
Within an hour, we're passing old riverbeds. And then we move out and we're seeing coastal sand dunes.
The type of sediments on top were the kinds of things that you would see if there'd been a rapid transgression, a very rapid rise in sea level overwhelming that shelf.
Ryan and Pitman are seeing the remains of an ancient shore, now submerged under 100 meters of water. It shows that the water level in the Black Sea was once much lower than it is today. Crucially, it proves that when the Black Sea re-flooded, it happened not over millions of years, but in a geological instant.
Had the sea slowly risen, the waves would have washed away the coastal dunes.
That gave us great confidence that we did have a flood.
It's just what the two scientists were hoping to find.
Yahoo! Hooray, hooray, hooray. Bill, we've done it. We've done it.
And this could be the type of flood of Genesis. This could be Noah's flood.
Oh, you live for this. You know, it rarely happens in a scientific lifetime, but it did happen to us.
Ryan and Pitman have now found evidence that the Black Sea flooded fast enough to be the flood of Noah. But they still don't know when. For that, they will need to look at solid evidence from beneath the bottom of the ocean. To get it, the Aquanaut team deploys drilling equipment. The core samples they retrieve will contain shells. These shells can be carbon dated. They will reveal the answer. Did the flood happen before humans evolved, or later, when our biblical ancestors may have witnessed it?
Here we're looking at cores extracted from the floor of the deep Black Sea. This is like a time machine. To a trained eyes, these cores are a library of ancient civilizations, but our civilizations are the creatures that lived in the oceans and the seas. This is the time of the flood, right here. And at this point, with this marked color change, the freshwater lake turns into a saltwater sea.
Ryan extracts shells from the layer where the freshwater lake became the Black Sea. These precious samples will be taken back to the United States for radiocarbon dating. If the shells are less than 10,000 years old, it will put the flooding of the Black Sea in the same time frame as Noah's flood. The scientists travel to Moscow, ready for the journey back to New York. But here, they face a problem. They discover that their expedition has attracted the interest of the Russian Secret Service. Soon after they arrive, the door to Pitman's room opens. A man walks in.
He spoke absolutely perfect English. And he said, "Excuse me, aren't you in the wrong room?" And so we showed him. He said, "No, we're in the right room." He said, "Oh, I'm sorry. They must have made a mistake down at the front desk." And he left. And I remember saying to Bill, I said, "He's KGB."
Pitman suspects that the man is preparing to search the room.
I went down and had dinner, and I came back a few hours later and knocked on the door very loudly and eventually got in the room. And they had gotten in.
Pitman discovers that things have been moved in his absence. But why? For half a century, the Soviet Union was officially an atheist state. If Ryan and Pitman can prove the Genesis flood is real, it could be a blow to decades of unbelief. Ryan begins to worry that the precious evidence he has gathered in the Black Sea may be confiscated. He leaves the vital samples with his Russian colleagues. Hopefully, they will be able to send them to New York later, when things have cooled down.
I decided not to take anything to the airport that I didn't have duplicates of, but I had to take the GPS back.
Nervously, Ryan and Pitman fly back to the safety of New York. But Ryan's bag, containing the GPS, does not arrive with them.
My suitcase did not come off the plane, so I knew it had been detained. It was delivered a few days later.
Nothing is missing. But Ryan and a colleague check the GPS to see where the suitcase has been.
It remembers its last fix, its last location when you turn it on. It displays it.
They turn it on and check the data.
Latitude and longitude came up. We wrote down the numbers, went to the map.
What they find astonishes them.
KGB headquarters in Moscow.
It's a chilling revelation.
They had taken the suitcase, opened it up, inspected it, wondered what this device was, turned it on, turned it off, put it back in the suitcase.
Ryan suspects the Russians may be concerned about their investigations in the Black Sea. It makes him fear that his vital core samples may be confiscated. If so, the Aquanaut voyage will have been in vain. Fortunately, his fears about the KGB are misplaced. The samples he left behind are sent from Moscow and arrive in New York. Ryan sends the shells to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute for carbon-14 dating. These shells will mark the time at which the Black Sea flood occurred. Weeks later, Ryan gets the critical results.
I get the phone call from Glenn Jones, and he says, "Bill, I have your results. Have you tricked me?" I said, "What do you mean have I tricked you?" He said, "You send me the samples all from the shells all from the same sample?" I said, "No." He said, "They all have the same age. It's 7,200 years ago."
7,200 years ago is in the New Stone Age, or Neolithic period. That's when humans first develop agriculture and begin to use pottery and metals. To Ryan and Pitman, this date means modern humans might have witnessed the flood. They could have preserved the story in their legends. But a vital question remains. Will this flood really be catastrophic enough to be recorded in the Bible? To find out, Ryan and Pitman turn their attention to the source of the floodwaters, the Bosporus itself. The Bosporus flows through the middle of the ancient city of Istanbul. It is the only connection between the Black Sea and the world ocean. The question is, did the seawater flow through here fast enough to create a flood of biblical proportions?
So how did this inrush of Mediterranean water work? Can we understand it? Is it a trickle? Is it a deluge?
Ryan and Pitman need a benchmark. Today, water at Niagara Falls rushes over at the rate of 88 cubic kilometers per year. Would the inflow of water at the Bosporus be anything to compare with this mighty torrent?
One of the interesting things about the Bosporus is it's only about 700-800 meters wide, and it's only about 30 meters deep. But a lot of water rushes through there.
During the last ice age, sea levels are up to 120 meters lower than they are today. The Black Sea Lake is completely cut off from the shrunken Mediterranean Sea. As the Earth warms and ice packs melt, sea levels rise. The Bosporus fills up with salt water from the world ocean. Eventually, the weight of water breaks a channel through the land barrier at the Bosporus Strait. Ocean water floods through that channel and into the lake.
If we take the depth of that floor of that channel and we take the width of it, we can say, all right, that channel is a pipe.
Pitman calculates how fast the water would flow through this natural pipe. He estimates a rate of between 9,000 and 18,000 cubic kilometers per year. It's a staggering figure.
Rivers will only do 100 or 150, 200 cubic kilometers in a year. The Hudson River is about 100 cubic kilometers per year. Nile, 100 cubic kilometers per year.
The flow of water is equivalent to hundreds of Niagara Falls. The impact of such a massive deluge would be catastrophic.
A flood like that would be heard for at least 100 kilometers. At least 100 kilometers, and the ground would shake for a long, long distance. So it must have scared the living hell out of people. A family fleeing the flood would have had to walk inland only a half a kilometer or so a day, maybe a kilometer a day, day after day, after day, after day, after day, after day, after daisy, daisy, day. No time off, no vacations here, until the Black Sea rose 50 meters.
By the time water levels equalize and the deluge subsides, the Black Sea has expanded by 150,000 square kilometers. It's obvious to Ryan and Pitman that a flood on this scale would indeed be of biblical proportions.
So I imagine every little group that's trying to escape with its domesticates, with its herds, is a mini ark. So I see the Black Sea having hundreds of arks, all going in different directions.
Ryan and Pitman are adamant that the Black Sea flood is indeed catastrophic enough to be the flood of Genesis. They are convinced that it happened in the 6th millennium BC, when people might be affected by it. But they have not yet shown that anyone actually was. To prove that, they now need to show that there were people living on the shores of the Black Sea Lake when it flooded. Any traces of those people would now be 100 meters underwater at the bottom of the Black Sea.
If the remains of a settlement were to be discovered underwater And if we could go down and get artifacts from it of the right age, that would be just amazing.
Ryan and Pitman are helpless, without funds and equipment. But their work attracts the attention of the renowned ocean explorer, Bob Ballard. In 1985, he located the wreck of the Titanic. At the turn of the century, he mounts an expedition to the Black Sea. Dr. Dwight Coleman is part of the team.
One of Dr. Ballard's early ideas was to look around the ancient shorelines of the Black Sea to see if there's any sign of human occupation, to see if we could find evidence of early civilizations that are now drowned by that catastrophic flood.
The team charter a research vessel, the Northern Horizon. Using sonar, they identify sites which contain potentially man-made objects. Then they deploy the ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles, to take a closer look. These can be guided over the ocean floor and send images back to the surface. Their most promising target is Site 82.
We came in with the ROVs on this site, and of course there's no sunlight down deep that penetrates, so it's completely dark. So the ROVs have to have lights, and that enables us to look about 10 to 20 meters out in front.
At the surface, scientists gather in the ops room to watch the images sent up from the blackness of the bottom of the sea.
It was really intense because it was almost like opening up presents on Christmas Day, for example, looking to see what you found.
What the cameras reveal astounds the scientists on board. Blocks of stone, which appear to be shaped by human hands. Objects, which could be primitive tools and wooden remains. The team believe they may have found evidence of human habitation.
We did call it Noah's house, sort of jokingly, but a lot of excitement about what was, and intrigue, because we didn't immediately know everything that we were looking at.
If Site 82 really is a house, then it proves that people were living on the banks of the lake before it flooded. To see if there is evidence of human habitation, the team adapt ROV Little Herc to collect samples from the ocean floor. Small wooden fragments are scooped up and brought to the surface. Then, they are sent for carbon-14 dating.
Quite a lot of anticipation while we were waiting for the results to come back from the lab.
So I heard right away about discoveries at Site 82. I became intrigued by that.
But the news is not good. The carbon dating results show that the samples are no more than a few hundred years old. The artifact is just old fishing gear that floated down onto the site. If there is proof of anyone living here, it remains hidden under the dark waters of the Black Sea. Despite the setback, Ryan and Pitman will not give up on their quest. They still need to find evidence of people affected by the flood.
If there were humans there, is there evidence of their response to such an event? Because only humans would take it into mythology.
The friends can't find any proof underwater. So they begin to look on land.
Anybody who lived down within a few meters of the Black Sea itself would have lost it all.
If the shelf was occupied by humans, we don't know, but if they were, they would have been permanently displaced.
The obvious place to look for displaced inhabitants is the modern shoreline of the Black Sea. Ryan and Pitman turn their attention to archaeology. They look for any signs of people who appear out of the blue around 5000 BC. On the Bulgarian shore, Ryan and Pitman discover something remarkable: the Varna necropolis.
They had unearthed a very large ancient cemetery. There are graves with remarkable full skeletons in them, and graves just with goods in them.
The Varna necropolis is dated to around 4500 BC. That's shortly after the date of the Black Sea flood. It has yielded an extraordinary treasure trove. Almost 6 kilograms of the oldest processed gold on Earth. Now held at the Regional Museum of History in Varna. The golden objects, demonstrated by Professor Smolinov, seem to show a grasp of complex mathematics.
There are little rectangles that have the 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean ratios. There are rings where the inside diameter, the outside diameter is the ratio of 7 to 22, which is pi.
The Varna display all the hallmarks of an advanced culture with a long history. But Ryan and Pitman can find no evidence in or near Varna of that history. It seems to them that this complex society suddenly appears as if from nowhere.
Now, the puzzling thing is there's no sophisticated work of gold. There's no predecessor of any more primitive steps. So where did it come from?
Ryan and Pitman conclude that the Varna gold is evidence of what they were looking for: a civilization displaced by the Black Sea flood. Now, there's just one final matter to resolve. Is this flood the same deluge described in the Bible? Back in New York, at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, Ryan and Pitman turn to Genesis for clues. The account doesn't specify where the flood began. But the story of Noah and the Ark follows soon after the story of Adam and Eve. They speculate that the flood is likely to have taken place near Eden. No one has yet proved where Eden actually was. But to Ryan, the ancient Black Sea lake could have been that earthly paradise.
I see the Black Sea freshwater lake as a oasis, a garden. I'll take a stretch. Let's just say a little liberty. A Garden of Eden in which you could have agriculture, trade, develop the art of maybe working some metals.
The book of Genesis records that out of the Garden of Eden, 4 rivers flow. One of them catches Ryan's eye.
The rivers are named, and one of the rivers is Pishon. And Pishon flows from the land rich in gold. They even put gold into this story.
This might explain how the Varna obtained their huge stocks of gold from around the biblical river of Pishon. If so, they could have taken the gold with them as they fled the advancing floodwaters.
What do you have in the artifacts after the flood? This extraordinary civilization with the world's oldest gold in gorgeous designs. What's gold doing in this story?
The Varna gold might be proof of one group of people displaced by the Black Sea deluge. But can Ryan and Pitman find any evidence that this flood affected wider humanity, as the Genesis flood did? Since the dawn of our species, humans survived by gathering and hunting. Then we begin to domesticate plants and animals and to cultivate them for food. This profound transformation happens in Europe around 5000 BC.
That was the age that the archaeologists had recognized was the period of rapid colonization of Europe by farmers that came from the east.
Remarkably, the spread of farming coincides with the date of the Black Sea flood. Is it coincidence? Ryan and Pitman don't think so. They discover that the seeds and livestock of these early farmers seem to originate from the Black Sea region.
What we had learned is that the animals that were being brought into Europe had genes that placed them in Turkey and Syria. The cereals all had ancestral wild strains whose DNA fingerprinted them to Anatolia. So everything that was coming into Europe was coming from the Black Sea area.
It's a startling revelation. Ryan and Pitman are reminded again of the Genesis story of the flood. God tells Noah to take 2 of every animal species into the ark. They wonder if the ark in the Bible story is a kind of code, a way of explaining what farmers would need to take with them if they fled a cataclysmic flood.
We've spent generation and generation developing these seeds, these animals. They're priceless. So is the ark the motive of being displaced and taking all the things you need for farming?
It's a compelling theory. But after 40 years, Ryan and Pitman's quest is still not over.
The quest was first for the flood and then the effect of the flood, but it has a never-ending fascination. What I regret most, Bill, is I'm not going to have another 40 years to work with you. It's been such a wonderful experience, but...
But I take pleasure in the next 40 days and 40 nights.
Oh, well, that's good, yeah.
So far, Ryan and Pitman's Black Sea deluge theory is just that, a theory. The proof, if any exists, lies deep beneath the waters of the Black Sea. Now a new generation of explorers are set to continue the investigation.
There's no doubt in my mind that evidence lies underwater that we have not yet found that could change archaeological stories worldwide.